Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of DDC Spotlight. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the drone regulations and their expansion into the US market. We've had a lot of questions about what the plan is and if the regulations differ from that of Canada. So joining us today, we have a new face for all of you. We have Mr. Steve Bogie, who recently joined the DDC team as VP of Flight Operations and Technology. I'll hand it over to Steve to talk about his background and the experience he brings to the team.
Ashley, thank you very much for the introduction. So, yes, as you mentioned, I've joined DDC fairly recently, November 2020 as Vice President, Flight Operations and Technology. And, it's been amazing in the last few months since I've been here. I've learned so much and, have also realized that there's a lot of synergies, with my aviation background. I've spent 30 years, in what we would call manned aviation today, other than it was just aviation back then, and really worked in a number of facets in the various organizations. So spent pretty much all of my career with Air Canada or the Air Canada family. Started off with the regional organizations and worked on the operations side of the business from, right down on the ramp loading aircraft to running airport operations, and then system operations control, which is a kind of central nerve center of an airline, where they do all the flight planning, crew planning, routing, weight and balance, any disruption management. So I did that for a number of years before moving over to the technology world, and began that with, my first foray was really as leader of the Y2K program for the Air Canada regionals as part of the broader Air Canada program. And, I found that very interesting in how technology could help the operations in so many ways, efficiently, through safety, through just streamlining processes, dissemination of information, all those types of things. So I ended up kind of moving over into the technology space and spent the next 12 to 15 years working through technology opportunities with the operations group, whether it be new efficiency systems, new flight planning systems, new systems for tracking aircraft maintenance, parts, supplies, optimization, and more recently, in recent years, was a big focus on mobility and data analytics and taking advantage of the data we collect. So, I found a lot of that lends itself really nicely to the transition to DDC, and the other part of my nature is really about wanting to learn. So the automation in the drone space is unique in many ways. The challenges faced with a drone operation in many cases are very different to manned aviation, and in many cases similar. So, it's been both a learning curve and an ability for me to help DDC with the experience I've had.
Thanks so much, Steve. You've definitely been a great addition to the team so far. So let's jump right into it with the first question. So as some viewers may know, we've had a great working relationship with Transport Canada for a number of years. Can you please talk to us a little bit more in detail about the type of relationship we have with Transport Canada, as well as the type of status we hold with them that allows us to operate in Canada?
Yeah, great question around the regulators. So, Transport Canada regulates the drone industry as it does aviation generally. I'd say the big difference between the two is, manned aviation has, 100 years of kind of learnings and trials and, some very well-established carriers within the industry, well-established OEMs within the industry that have really good defined processes, really good defined validation criteria. And the drone industry we're trying to leverage a lot of that. However, you know, as I mentioned, there's a lot of uniqueness in the industry, and so when you look at the risk associated with drones and how you apply that, you know, there are some differences, and you know, we work very closely with Transport Canada here in Canada, the FAA in the States, and you know, in certain cases even EASA in Europe, the Indian regulators and the African regulators, to understand you know, the details of their programs and how we move things forward. You know, this is an evolving industry, and certainly the regulatory environment, while there's a, you know, the core synergy or the core theme is about safe, secure, reliable operations. You know, there's a number of different ways to prove that, to validate that. So, you know, for example, in the US, they've really looked at a very similar approach to manned aviation, particularly with the larger type drones, our Condor, now where you look at, you know, type certifications, production certifications, airworthiness certifications. It's a fairly regimented process and well-defined, which, you know, is great, because then it's very clear. Whereas the Canadians, the Europeans, and some others have really looked at a risk assessment on a case-by-case basis, and well, it's a different approach, and you know, again, the underlying fundamentals are around safety. You know, the methodology to get there is a little bit different, but you know, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. You know, at the end, it's about running a safe, secure, reliable operation, and having the processes, the procedures, the backups, the systems to support all of that. So, you know, that's fundamental in, you know, everything we do, and the idea of working collaboratively with the regulators is, you know, kind of part of our culture and what it is we want to do, so that we can not only move DDC forward, but we move the industry forward. Because, you know, this is, as I mentioned, an evolving technology, it's an evolving industry. So, you know, being very tight with the regulators is beneficial not only for them, but for us as well. And, you know, it's paid great dividends for us. It really has. And I can't speak highly enough about, you know, the work that's been done cooperatively, and will continue to be done cooperatively in this space, so that, you know, we all kind of win in the end, but we do it in a safe and responsible manner.
Can you explain to us what type certification is and how it applies to the 3 drones that we have in our fleet?
Type certification. So I mentioned that a few minutes ago, and, you know, type certification is really about certifying the airframe or the drone or the RPA itself, and, you know, all of the parts that have gone on into it, all of the manufacturing that's put it together. And it's really about making sure that you have a repeatable, consistent product that then is validated, tested, that it's safe, it's airworthy, and you can repeat that on a regular basis. It's a notion that is very prevalent in manned aviation and has been for many, many, many years. So, you know, it's a great process. However, it's just a process to prove safety, to prove reliability. You know, as I mentioned, you know, it's been adopted in the States by the FAA, and, you know, a couple other countries around the world are looking at it. Whereas in Canada, we've gone to more of a risk assessment. So, you know, process using the SORA methodology, where we actually prove out through testing, through validation, through retesting, revalidation, and then building reliability, building hours, building time, flying the machines, and documenting all of the results, so that, you know, we're very comfortable when we say this drone or this RPA is good to fly commercially, we can do that with the documentation and the knowledge that we've put it through its paces, and we're very comfortable with what we've seen. And that's how we work with Transport Canada in that manner. So where here in Canada we don't go through the certification process. So the type certificate, as you know, in manned aviation isn't applicable. And, but that doesn't mean that anything is any different from a safety perspective. So it's just a different methodology to prove it out, as I've mentioned a couple of times. So in Canada as well, we have something that we call a compliant operator status. And that means that, we've been validated by Transport Canada, the regulator, that we are compliant with the intent of the regulations. And, we're very proud of the fact that, we were the first compliant operator in Canada, and we continue to be a compliant operator. And, that just bodes well for the work we've done, the work we're going to do, and our strong and tight collaboration that we have with our friends at Transport Canada.
And considering that drone logistics is still a new emerging industry, what limitations for drone operations exist from a regulatory standpoint?
Yeah, great question. And Ashley, and as I mentioned, this is an emerging and somewhat of a disruptive technology. But having said that, it's disruptive from a technology perspective and probably a business operations perspective. It's not an unproven technology, and it's not an unsafe technology. So, again, going back to our work with the regulators, it's about building time, it's about building reliability, it's about building credibility, and, just validating and proving that the technology works in the various scenarios and the various possibilities that we could encounter when flying RPAs in, various regions in Canada or wherever else in the world. So, it's as the proving happens, as new RPAs come in, as new concepts of operations are proving themselves out, both the RPAs will evolve, the methodology for validating them will evolve, and as well the regulations. So it's really about, again, safety first, proving and validating that the particular RPA is safe and that you can validate that and it's repeatable. The regulations will evolve just like they did in manned aviation. However, I see them evolving much, much quicker in this space because a lot of the technology that we're leveraging and the processes that we're leveraging are learnings that have gone through in manned aviation, and it's the technology and the redundancy and our ability to manage these are so much better than what they were even 20 or 30 years ago. So, I see this as a highly evolving space that will move fairly quickly, over the next few years. So, hang on. It's coming. So.
Another frequently asked question is, how can drones be integrated into active and controlled airspace?
So the integration with the airspace. So, again, another great question. There's really a couple different things to think about in this space. So one is typically a drone operates at a relatively low altitude, and is not necessarily in the same airspace as what a commercial operation would be. Now, having said that, there's non-commercial aviation that could operate in the same airspace as a drone, or drones and particularly rotor wing aviation could be looking at similar roles. You could use a helicopter as an example, to do several of the tasks or functions that we're proposing we do with a drone. So there is that possibility, but there's a couple of approaches here. One is a unified traffic management system, not dissimilar to what's offered in manned aviation, and there's a number of organizations working on that. And we're following that very closely, obviously. And the other technology that continues to make great strides is we would talk about it as TCAS in the manned aviation world, or DAA, detect and avoid, in the RPA world, where onboard sensors can actually detect traffic around it. And then take the appropriate actions, as would a commercial aircraft, to resolve the conflict. So, again, evolving technologies, and they're evolving very quickly. So again, because there is technology available, it just got to be scaled for the environment that we're operating in. The other kind of component of this is, particularly with us, we look at integration with the existing airspace, and here in Canada, our nav provider, Nav Canada, when we do look at operating in airspace where they control today. So it's generally known in the industry as ADS-B technology, where they can see the drones, and they can control movements within that space. Not dissimilar to commercial aviation or manned aviation aircraft today. So, again, a couple of different things going on here, but certainly there will be a need in the very near future, and it's evolving quickly, as is the rest of this, for the integration of drones. Not only with other drones, but with commercial and non-commercial aviation as well.
Thanks. We definitely get asked that question a lot about how our drones can fly in the air with other aircrafts. So now moving on to some questions about the U.S. expansion. So recently we announced a PR about our expansion into entering into the U.S. market. Can you provide some more detail about what the plan is for that expansion?
Yeah, so we announced last year that we're proactively looking to enter the U.S. market. So, there's obviously a significant opportunity that we see there, as well as here in Canada, but, forward-looking. So we've been in discussions with the FAA to understand the process to certify, get the type certification, the production certification, and the airworthiness certification with them. So it's very clearly understood what that process is. We're kind of early in the process, and there's a lot of the documentation submissions that need to happen before we ever fly down there. But, things that we're doing here in Canada and things that we're operating today all help us move that forward. And I've mentioned it a couple times, building the reliability, building the credibility, just building hours and flying hours, all contributes to not only the validation of safe and reliable here in Canada, but it does for the FAA as well. So every day we fly, every day that we operate, and every test that we go through is all documented as part of our ongoing evolution and data sharing with both the FAA and regulators here in Canada and anywhere else we look to operate. Because, again, I've said it a couple times, and, the underlying principle here is safe and reliable, and being able to prove that. And, in a lot of cases, hours on drones, landings, takeoffs, just prove out that the drone or the RPA is capable of doing the mission that we said it could do as part of our concept of operation. So that's not unique anywhere in the world. And we just add to that every day of every week of every month. So.
And can you just tell us about how the U.S. regulations are different from that of Canada, and if it makes it any easier operating in the U.S. considering that we're already operational in Canada?
Certainly there are differences between the Canadian and the U.S. regulations, as I mentioned a couple times through the discussion, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And in fact, they're both very good, very well accepted processes and approaches. And we're hoping at one time we can get some, in the not too distant future, we can get some harmonization between the two. Because as it stands right now, there are different processes, different paperwork, submissions, and different trials that we have to prove ourselves out. So, it is somewhat labor intensive to go through the two, but the U.S. is a little bit more traditional in their approach, and they kind of mirror the manned aviation space, particularly for drones that are larger than 55 pounds, which in our case is not only the Robin, but the Condor as well. And with the Sparrow, while it's a smaller drone and it's cost that way, there's still a fairly regimented process that go through in the States. Whereas here in Canada, they're all looked at as a through the risk assessment process. It's a similar process, and it's just a matter of the hours and the time and the reliability proving that we need to go through. So it's like I've said, the main thing is the concept of operations, get those stable, run them, prove them, test them, and continue to evolve your program and share it with the regulators. And listen to the feedback, be collaborative. We found that to be very successful to date, and it certainly, we see it as a key to success going forward. So that's top of mind for us kind of every day that we operate and everything that we do.
Thanks, Steve. That's all the questions we have for this episode. So thank you for taking the time to answer that. I hope that's cleared up a lot of questions to our viewers.
It's great, Ashley. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you all for watching and for the continued support that you always show DDC. Stay tuned for more Spotlight videos coming out, and be sure to follow us on all social media channels. Thanks!